First, I just want to say that I truly appreciate living in this wonderful country. I believe the United States has the best criminal justice system in the world. It's not a perfect system because it does have people in it. I want to thank those who work in law enforcement and in our system of justice. My gratitude is sincere, but in my case, they got it wrong. I am innocent. Over 4 years ago, I was accused of influencing a judicial decision. It never crossed my mind to influence a decision. I was never asked to influence a decision. No one ever indicated in any way that they were being influenced by any of my fundraising activities. During that 2012-14 cycle, I had been asked to raise money and was raising money for somewhere between 15, 25 candidates. Just jotted down right there. On January 9th, 2015, Mike Maggio signed a plea agreement with federal prosecutors. In this plea agreement, a message from me to Maggio is quoted: "Win, lose, or draw." The government alleges that this message did not mean win, lose, or draw, you have Morton's support. Rather, they claim the phrase meant the opposite, that only through a favorable ruling would Maggio's candidacy be supported. I use the phrase win, lose, or draw regularly in emails, texts, daily conversation. The government knows this, but the phrase win, lose, or draw that I communicated to Maggio was so damning to their fake narrative that they contrived a new meaning for this common English language phrase. It is in Maggio's plea, and it's even in my indictment. The common sense meaning for the phrase win, lose, or draw is to reassure that one has support regardless of any decision made. That definition comes from Maggio's plea. But in that plea, it says it is not to reassure that one has support regardless of any decision made. On October 29th, 2018, Maggio filed another motion stating on page 4 of that motion, and I quote directly, "Maggio was never indicted. Instead, with no deliberation and under pressure from his counsel, he was rushed to judgment. His counsel alleged that the government would initiate a prosecution against his wife and him unless he pleaded guilty himself to the plea agreement referenced previously." After almost 5 years and millions of dollars, the government decided to ask for one indictment, me. On Friday, January the 4th, I met with federal authorities for the very first time, believing that U.S. Attorney Cody Highland, his first assistant, Jonathan Ross, Assistant U.S. Attorney Julie Peters, former acting U.S. Attorney Pat Harris, and others would be interested in finding the truth about this matter. I was wrong. In the meeting with this group, accompanied by my attorney at the time, Bud Cummins, it was stated by Mr. Highland's first assistant, Jonathan Ross, that he and Mr. Highland and the rest of the staff, and I quote, had been actively involved in the case and had met the day before and determined that I could not be believed and that they would move forward aggressively. So, you have a 5-year investigation, approximately 5-year investigation, with no new information coming in the past several years that brings down an indictment against one person, me, whom they never talked to or had spoken to previously, and whom they had made a decision not to believe me before they heard from me for the very first time. With the entire indictment resting on the statements of a judge who simply said he understood certain actions to mean certain things, and the government conspiring with others to pervert the use of the phrase win, lose, or draw, even though the government had seen many examples of me using that phrase accurately. Now to my indictment. First of all, I've been wrongly accused. But secondly, and in some ways more important to me, persons B through F in the indictment, placed in the indictment, were placed there to embarrass them and pressure them. This is wrong. One person had one meeting with me and Maggio about Maggio's campaign. Other persons contributed legally and transparently to Maggio's campaign. Another person on the list simply asked me to help Maggio raise funds. Regardless of how you interpret the references to me, these people did nothing wrong and should not be listed in this indictment. The bottom line, the PACs were set up legally and transparently. Contributions raised for Maggio's campaign were raised legally and transparently. Nothing was hidden. Mr. Morton did mistakenly send contributions to me for another judge's campaign before the time allowed. As I've stated previously under oath, I was not an officer of that campaign. As stated previously, I did not communicate to that candidate or anyone in the campaign about those checks. I set them aside and delivered them to the campaign at the first allowed fundraiser, and I changed the date on the checks to reflect the date I gave them to the campaign. Legal, transparent. The prosecutor looked at the truth relating to this matter and then made a decision to threaten Maggio and his wife with prison time on another matter, unless Maggio signed a document that said he understood he was being influenced, though he never indicated in any way that he thought he was being influenced to me. And then the prosecutor took the egregious step of changing the use of the phrase win, lose, or draw so as to support their fake narrative. I've never been more at peace, and I've never been happier. I love my teaching. I work in an institution that truly respects a core American value. That one is innocent until proven guilty. And last spring, one of my sons gave me a landscaping business that I really enjoy, working there after hours in the summer. But I promise you, at this point, if there was something here for me to plead guilty to, just to be done with all of this, that would keep the prosecutors from spending more of our tax dollars, I would plead guilty. But I can't. I cannot perjure myself. Even though I have been asked by the prosecutors several times to come in and change my story, which they know means I would have to lie, I will not, because I made a decision with my wife years ago that I would not perjure myself regardless of the pressure that the prosecutor, the U.S. government, my U.S. government, brings to bear on me and my family. It's kind of strange, I know, but I'm probably more upset about the bad call against the Saints last Sunday than I am about being indicted. I can't do anything about the bad call against the Saints. But through this process, I can hope that the truth will prevail. And trust me, if the truth is ever made known about this issue, I will be found innocent. But at the very least, I hope that by me going through this, the next person who is innocent and faces something like this will have a better shot at justice. So, win, lose, or draw, I feel great about this process. Now, we're limited in time. I'm going to ask